Refuge, what page is that on? That's 27. So just take a few deep breaths, arrive here. And try to remember that your consciousness has been circling aimlessly since beginningless time. And due to causes and conditions of great virtue, you've manifested a perfect human embodiment. Perfect human embodiment. And you have the inclination to seek liberation. And you have all the resources and enough free time, healthy enough body, enough support. You found your way to a community in which authentic Dharma is offered, and you have the freedom to pursue it, and you've been surrounded by great teachers and masters. You live in an age where even though the society has degenerated to the point where not much interest in Dharma is there, you yourself have interest, which is a great virtue. And so you found this precious human life, and it's extremely rare. And yet at any moment you could die. And the time of your death is uncertain. Even healthy young people die what seems like randomly. There's no way to account for it. But there is a way to prepare for it. And that's to maximize all your resources and your precious opportunity to rehearse and prepare for the inevitable. And you have already grown very, very tired of superficial existence that doesn't create any lasting reward. And even though the external circumstances are pulling at your attention all the time, you have grown sensitive. You have grown aware of the pitfalls of leading that kind of life, attracted to appearances. And that is an extremely rare thing. that is the dawning of a kind of intuition, a dharmic intuition. The kind of mind that arises that does not mistake what is impure to be pure, to mistake what is impermanent to be permanent, to mistake what is essentially selfless to be a concrete self, and to mistake what is inherently dissatisfying to be dissatisfying. That is a Dharma mind. It is a mind that is well trained in the Dharma. So I like to refresh people to think about the currents in the ocean, and you're just like a rubber ducky in the vast ocean, being moved by the waves and the currents haphazardly by your instincts through evolution. And then you have this precious human life where you can actually regain control and agency over the course of your evolution. And that is what is meant by the taking of refuge. So when we say this prayer, remind yourself of the enormous power that you have just by having a human mind and the precious human embodiment, that you can reclaim agency over a vast, beginningless, aimless wandering through cycles of unnecessary stress and trauma. and that no one can give you that, and no one can rescue from that except you yourself access what is innately yours and learn how to tame your mind. Okay, so let's do the refuge and generation of the bodhicitta. A little faster tempo than maybe you're used to. Sangye chodan sokni chonam la jangju bardu dakni kyapsuchi dagi chenye gipe sonam ki drolar penchir sangye drupa shu. Sangye chodan sokni chonam la jangju bardu dakni kyapsuchi dagi chenye gipe sonam ki drolar penchir sangye drupa shu. Sangye chodan sokni chonam la jangje bardu dakni kyabzu chi dagi jenye gipe sonam ke drolar penche sangye drupa shu. And feel in your heart that you have begun to become sensitive to your own innate power, and you have directed your consciousness towards mastering your evolution, the captain of your ship. But this is not just for your own benefit, but imagine that you're doing this also motivated in order to benefit others, in order to help create that sense of agency in others, so that they also aren't compelled like a rubber ducky in the waves of samsara any longer, ensnared in their confusion and their affliction. So if it helps to think about your partners, spouses, children, loved ones, the immediate people whom you care about, to spark that interest of not only doing this practice for yourself, but also for their well-being and their liberation, then you can imagine the person that helped you get here today. Maybe the people that drive the trains or drive the Ubers, maybe the people that got you the coffee. These are considered the nameless, faceless ones, the strangers that just make life sort of happen, whom you ordinarily don't have that much interest in, whom I call the individuals who are cardboard cutouts in your life, one-dimensional. If you just pay attention a little further, they all have lives. You go into a portal and you begin to feel the sensitivity of the cab driver's life, that they have children, that they have hopes and dreams, and you recognize that they're also driven by impulses. They are sleepwalking through life. They are impulsively trying to satisfy themselves in an endless treadmill of dissatisfying pursuits. They, just like you, want to be happy, and you, just like them, or have found your way to an endless stream of dissatisfying experiences. And so you generate the wish that your activities here today not only benefit you, but also somehow vicariously or directly begin to benefit them. And then that concentric circle of inclusivity, then it can expand to even include the difficult people, those that have rejected you, those that have abandoned you, and those that have mistreated you to whatever degree on the spectrum of intensity. Do take a moment to then also cross the threshold of appearances and recognize that they too are being driven by stress impulses of greed and hatred and delusion in a way they're no different from you. We also have hurt countless sentient beings in the way that they have hurt us. And it is all being driven by unconscious impulses. And even if they too could awaken to their original nature, if they could master their own ship, then they also would have not harmed you. And they will not harm any other living being going forward. So even generate the wish that they too, by your virtue of your practice, either directly or indirectly, come to know themselves in such a way that they no longer harm any living being, that they feel the peace of liberation. And so just feel like in this prayer that we have just generated the altruistic intent, the true source of meaning in one's life, the wish to seek liberation, not only for oneself, but for others. So just take a moment to steep in that reflection. brief mandala offering on page 16. So you can just imagine in the palm of your hands, do kindly imagine that there's an entire planet or universe. We have all created together a planet that is in peril because of our confusions. And we'd like very much to reverse it and to intervene and to begin to recreate societies and the biosphere to be more harmonious, more free, more equitable, more sustainable, more blissful, more potent. Let the planet return to green. So imagine that vision of that planet in your hands. You hold that in the palm of your hands, both metaphorically and literally. And then there is a sense that we can't do it as just ourselves. This is a co-creation. This planet is a co-creation of all the living beings on this planet. We're all creating it together. And no one of us can completely purify the planet. Just as if that were true, the Buddha would have already done it. So then collectively we are asking the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas to also help support all of us so that together we can awaken to our true potential. And together we can recreate a planet that's more sublime for all living beings, excluding none of them. Nobody gets priced out in the Buddhaverse. Saji pokye joksing me tong tram ri rabling ji ning de gen padi sange jing du mikte ulwardi drokun nam lang shung perchu pasho. Idam Guru Ratna Mandalakam Niryatayami. So just let it dissolve into emptiness. And we can do some meditation together. So just begin by finding a comfortable posture. And go ahead and clear your mind by focusing on your breath for 10 rounds of breath. And just by way of review of the 6 preliminaries from yesterday, we are now seated in a beautiful space. The space has been cleaned and prepared by the volunteers, so do generate thanks that before arriving, sentient beings motivated by altruistic intention have cleared the space, arranged the space in such a way that is inviting. Second preliminary is to create an altar and set up offerings, and so that also has that also through altruistic intention has been done for us. The volunteers have got up early and made sure the water bowls are filled with water, and the offerings to the Buddha have already happened. So do vicariously enjoy that has happened before you arrived. The third preliminary is to prepare the body and mind. So do find a comfortable posture, feel the sense of dignity as you sit. The mind has been prepared by taking of refuge and generating of the altruistic intention. And then just nice, concentrated mind now. Awake, 10 breaths. Now do another 10 breaths, but now bring your mind into the body so that you inhabit the full form with awareness. You can feel the sensitivity of being alive in this body, in this present moment, as you do another round of 10 breaths. And now recognize, since the moment you woke up and had that first waking consciousness, the first moment of waking consciousness, immediately appearing to your mind is the sense that the world is fixed and that you are a fixed being entering into a fixed world. You're you, and the bed is there, and the walls are there, and the floor is there, and the buildings are there, and the taxi and the subway is there, in a kind of fixed way that we just automatically assume to be the way it is. So then just imagine and analyze, use a little bit of critical thinking, take any one of those objects, appearing to the mind, absolutely real, and just begin to analyze. Go and find it. Look at the bed, look at the tap or the faucet or the coffee mug or the car, the train, any one of them. Suddenly you see that they're all comprised of parts. And none of the parts are the thing that appears as the whole. The handle of the mug is not the mug. The base of the mug is not the mug. The top of the mug is not the mug. The exterior of the mug is not the mug. The interior of the mug is not the mug. Where is the mug? The same with the car. The tire is not the car. The axle, not the car. The door, not the car. Windows, not the car. Seats, not the car. Engine, not the car. Where is the car? Even the parts of the parts can be analyzed further. Is the tire the tire? Is the exterior of the tire the tire? The interior of the tire the tire? Everything upon analysis so easily breaks down, so easily. But we've never stopped to think about it. We've never stopped to think about it. There's absolutely nothing that exists the way that it appears. Even the self. The self yesterday is the same to the self today. The self a last minute is the same as the self this minute. Is the hand the self, the arm the self, the leg the self, the organs the self? Is the angry thought the you? Is the loving thought the you? Where do they go after they disappear? Who's having the thought? Everything dissolves under analysis. Just scratch the surface, everything dissolves. So now imagine that the world dissolves, literally. The universe, solar system, planet, continent, country, city, this space, all dissolves into emptiness. Spontaneously, suddenly a luminous ocean of consciousness appears. And your body breaks down in the death process. Earth element dissolving into water element, dissolving into fire element, dissolving into wind element, dissolving into space element. Spontaneously, the material body dissolves into a point of consciousness like a bubble floating in a luminous sea. And we could just rest here. We could just rest openly in the quantum level of reality. Mahamudra, just resting in the nature of mind, the openness of mind, the spaciousness of mind, the clarity of mind, without fabrication. Or through altruistic intention, that we can recreate an environment that's going to have the reinforcement contingency of aiding and speeding and hastening our evolution. So imagine spontaneously out of the luminous sea of consciousness, a beautiful valley appears with mountain peaks on all sides. And above the mountain peaks, a beautiful, vast, blameless blue sky with the sun at its apex, raining down rays of light. And at the center of the valley is a beautiful, shimmering lake. All of this is luminous. None of it is fixed or concrete. It's all holographic, fluid. At the center of the shimmering lake, a beautiful island. At the center of an island, a beautiful tree with a very firm trunk, vast branches extended in all directions. And you find yourself in a hologram body yourself, seated there at the base of the tree. And as the rays of the sun beam down, they are refracting on jewels or gems in the tree, and rainbow-colored lights. You're bathed in rainbow-colored lights, ruby reds and emerald greens, and topaz and sapphires and diamonds. And then your gaze is able to perceive directly that it's not gems in the trees, but that are actually living beings, miraculous, awakened living beings who are raining down these tremendous nectar blessings. I feel that this is the world tree, the central axis connecting heaven and earth. And these are all the sacred wisdom keepers of all traditions. And at the center of the tree is your own personal mentor, he or she whom inspires you the most, melts your heart. And pay attention to their form. See their beautiful eyes gazing at you with care, and a lovely, reassuring smile that suggests there's absolutely nothing to worry about. And a beautiful, open, confident posture, receptive and confident. And allow yourself finally to disarm so that you could admire this way of being, that you'd have some hope to be more like this. the wish to be more like this. And allow yourself to be moved and see yourself make an offering to your mentor. And as you make this offering, feel that the mentor receives your offering, your gift, with such grace and gratitude, and that there's a mutual closeness, proximity, joy that's created. A sense of safety, a sense of holding. And then within that sense of safety, do kindly try to have an honest inventory of your predicament, circumstance, and identify one habit that you'd like to reduce, or one secret you'd like to confess, or one limitation you want support with. And immediately as you identify it, the mentor receives it and has absolutely no judgment. Complete acceptance, radical acceptance. But they also have this beautiful vision of you. They recognize this limitation as just a wrinkle in the cloth that can be ironed out. They also see you at the end of your journey fully actualized. They have no fear, no hesitation, no doubt. And now spend some time recognizing all the virtue that you're collecting, the sacrifices that you've made, the wonderful things that you've done, said, thought, that you're trying. You have earnestness, you have generosity, you have patience, you have ethics, you have diligence, you have concentration, you have wisdom. Even just the seeds, recognize, rejoice. Feel healthy pride. And then think about your Dharma brothers and sisters all over the planet, also trying to become more fully human, more caring, more sensitive, more aware of cause and effect, more virtuous. And don't let the propaganda get you down. We are actually awakening as a planet. We're amazing. It's an amazing time to live. And then recognize there's still a little ways to go for your evolution to be complete. So now ask your mentor to bless your mind and to really clear your mind of any obstacles and hindrances, but also to actualize or activate the potentialities in your mind. So in the depths of your heart, then do make a request. Firmly request, please, help me wake up. Help me heal. So your mentor then sends instantaneously, without any hesitation, happy with delight, a beautiful rainbow nectar, light ray that comes from their heart and comes gently to your crown. And then it slips like a drop of sap inside a tree, down from your crown, gently to your throat, and from your throat, gently to your heart, and at your heart, like a drop merging with the ocean, dissolves into your inner mind, the center of your heart. And the moment it hits there, just feel almost like a spacious opening, a clearing. And in that clearing, then, a beautiful harmonic resonance emerges from the depths of your heart, like a sparrow's call in the opening of the woods. So we'll do 7 rounds and really feel the vibration bellowing from the depths of your psyche and resonating in the entire body. And as you do, imagine that a continual rain of blessings is being emanated from your mentor's heart, hitting your crown, throat, and heart, purifying all the negativities, almost like clearing the stains or plaque out of an artery. And as you do, the vibration is loosening the imprints so that they can be cleansed, washed, bathed, transformed. Now just observe the body. Or to feel a loosening of blocks, very, very subtle psychic blocks, knots. Now request that the mentor and all the lineage remain with you always and be ever available, so that when you get off the mat or the cushion, you enter into reality, the lineage is ever accessible from within you. And delighted to be asked all the peripheral bodhis and bodhisattvas and spiritual guides, they all melt into the heart of your central mentor. And then your mentor, him or herself, begins to dissolve from the top of their head to the tips of their toes inwards towards their heart, melting into the form of a teardrop which coalesces all the wisdom and compassion of the entire lineage. Everything one needs to become awake. That drop comes to your crown. And do, before you receive it, feel worthy of it. Feel the dignity of being the recipient of the lineage. And then let it slip past your crown, past your throat, past your heart, and merge inseparably with your own inner mentor that is budding and growing and maturing in confidence from within. So that the teardrop within and the teardrop without merge into one. And instantaneously you awake as your mentor. You're under the tree, your body is in the confident, regal posture of your mentor. Your emotional tone is buoyant and confident and serene. And your mind is perfumed with the attitude and the perspective and the creativity. And suddenly you are turning outward so that the tree now is at your back. And in the valley, suddenly all the living beings emerge and appear. And the first group are your loved ones and your ancestors and your family members and your friends. And then to their left is the vast array of neutral strangers. And then to the right is a contingency of difficult people. But all of them share this look on their face, the dazed look of a weary traveler wandering in the cycles of samsara. And you remember, through your empathy, you remember what that's like. So now, out of compassion, then feel the wish that every single living being, no matter what their circumstance, no matter what their relationship, wish that they could all awaken and feel the joy of liberation, of remembering who they are. So then let's imagine our heart opening so that we can send a wave of beautiful rainbow light. And as you do, you'll use the mantra as a vehicle of resonance that will tap their crown, throat, and heart, and as it drips and melts at the center of their being, each and every one of them will awaken. Now just breathe and imagine all living beings have been brought into the jewel tree resonance circuitry. They have been awoken from the slumber of samsara. And try to imagine that each and every one of them now wants to participate in the recreation of the planet. So they scurry off to their various domains and begin creatively re-engineering the planet to be more equitable, to be more sustainable, to be more harmonious. And finally, try to imagine that the planet zooming out from distance, you see the planet circling on its axis. It's more green and more vibrant and more peaceful. And then just as we complete that vision and hold that vision, it dawns on you that this is just a simulation. It's all empty. It's just a creation. It's a better creation. But it is still empty. So then, thankfully, just allow it to dissolve back into emptiness. The valley, the lake, the sky, the tree, your body, all dissolves back into emptiness. Luminosity. Instantaneously, the world reappears in its ordinary form. Universe, solar system, planet, continent, country, city, space, body, all reappear. You're a point of consciousness hovering above your own body, seated in meditation posture in a shrine room. You're about to take rebirth. And remember your vow and your commitment. Remember that things are not what they seem, but that there's a kind of playfulness, a creative art form that can happen. If you inhabit this form, you will be able to manifest in whatever domain, whatever influence with your family members, your colleagues, in your whatever society. And that truly is a purposeful life, a meaningful life. And once you're convinced of this, then just feel free then to enter into your body and inhabit your body as a bodhisattva being, as an ambassador of the lineage, but inhabiting your personal form and renewing a sense of purpose. And then just before you open your eyes, feel your body again. Feel connected with your body. Feel the floor beneath you. But just remember, there's this little teardrop of rainbow nectar, wisdom and compassion at your heart. It's always there. It's always there, reminding you. Okay. Good morning, Bodhisattvas. How's everybody doing? It's okay? Not too cold? Do we need more blankies? Maybe we can start with any questions from yesterday. Any issues, challenges, reflections, comments from yesterday? before we dive in. Don't leave me hanging. Anything at all to stimulate a little discussion before we dive in. Somebody's got to have something. It's blank? It's just blank, huh? Is it too early?
It just seems so absolute. I mean, it's, even in mathematics there are bits of things where there's truth without cause. There's like things that can't be proved. So you wanted something.
Yeah.
So it just seems, I was just reading a book completely unconnected to this on the way on the train here this morning, and, well, sort of, but very much not Buddhist, and he's talking about mathematics and proof being cause, and then it's like, well, there's the diagonal he has this proof. It's called the incompleteness theorem, that there's truths that can't be proved. Given a set of axioms, there's always that you can come up with truths that can't be proved. And proof and cause, karma, just sort of looking at it in that context, things that happen, things that are true that don't have cause.
I mean, the most important thing for me is I don't think that blind faith is a good thing. I mean, I think that's clear in the Buddhist tradition. They seem to present a lot of very sophisticated and intricate concepts and theories, and I think you can have two extremes: people that believe with blind faith, and then people that are completely skeptical to the hilt. And I think there's an opportunity to engage in inquiry and not be so keen on resolving it so quickly, one way or the other, being so sure one way or the other. And I think that for Western-minded people have a lot of scientific, rational skepticism. It's a difficult concept, but it's worth playing with and investigating and checking out and playing that fine line between being so quick to be resolved one way or the other. And then I also think that, like the interpretation that I proposed yesterday, it's a slight difference, but it's probably enough to receive some definite criticisms. But even just proposing something like that, just to mix it up a little, can be stimulating. It just gets you to think about it a little bit, maybe think about it in a little bit different way. It's not proposed to be an absolute. It's proposed to be a practical thought and experiment. And then it's really up to each of us to take the time to see how that can actually work in our lives. That the thing from taking it from a theory to an application, that's the most important part. The life application is your experiment. And then you can jettison it if it makes absolutely no sense. I mean, the first thing that we did yesterday is the first level of wisdom, which is the level of hearing. Did you hear the concept? And then the next one was, we had some dialogue about it to see if it even made sense. And then the third one would be, what's this actually like if I put it into practice as an experiment in my life for 6 months? Would I notice anything? So at each one of those stages, I think there's this healthy opportunity not to cling to one side or the other. It's definitely this way, and then there's no more inquiry. It's definitely not this way. It can never be that way, and then there's no more inquiry.
It's like, I liked what you were saying yesterday about karma because it's more flexible than some of the things. Because there's quite a dogmatic. It seems slightly dogmatic. Everything comes back to something that's happened, and and if you look at it more from the point of view you're talking about, it makes more sense. As in how you experience it and that sort of thing. But there are things that it just seems to exclude the idea of spontaneous things that just seem to happen.
Yeah.
Things occasionally things.
I mean, I think there's a difference between being able to know them or being able to or suggesting that they have no cause. Those are two different things. Do you see the difference?
Yes.
So one is that there's always a cause, and the other one is, but you might not be able to know it.
It might be an unknowable cause.
It might be, yeah, because I think the problem, I mean, at least from the dependent origination teachings, everything has to have a cause. If you don't have that, then you leave yourself up to something that's completely random, and then that leads to magical thinking.
Yes, yes.
So like,
It might not be a knowable cause.
it might be not knowable. And then they would say, well, like someone with the Buddha's refined level of awareness can know all things. That's what the Buddha is, one of the qualities of the Buddha is omniscience. And it's not the omniscience of knowing how many grains of sand there is in the Ganges, but it's the omniscience of knowing what the causes are that are reaping the effects. That's what the Buddha's omniscience knows. So like when the Buddha gained enlightenment under the Bodhi tree, it is said that he recognized in the second or third wave of the night the karmic propensities of all living beings. It's not that he knew like some mysterious phenomenon about wave patterns or why the oceans are the way they are. He recognized something about the psychology of humanity, and not only his own, but every single living being's. But in any event, I don't know if there's any flexibility on the idea that everything has a cause in Buddhist theory. But it may be possible that things are being caused and they remain mysterious or they may not unknown to you. And then I think there's even the other thing that some things are worth knowing and others are not that important. The ones that are worth knowing are the ones that lead to freedom. But more important is have an open mind and try to avoid these two extremes of jumping in with blind faith. I mean, I've heard the Dalai Lama tell, I'll never forget it, in New York City, one of these big amphitheaters with the Dalai Lama, thousands of people. And he said there was a small, sizable portion, as there always is in the West, of Tibetans. The Tibetan community is there. And he said to them, you guys have unbelievable devotion. So sincere, so sweet. And there's unquestionable, unshakable devotion. But then he said, but you need to exercise your critical reason. You need to read some of the scientific treatises and study a little bit more. He said that. And then he looked at all the Westerners and he said, you guys are very smart, sharp. Your reason is very good. You can read the text very well, but you have no devotion, very little devotion, very little. Everything has to be like analyzed. Then the mystery. What about the mystery? What about the unseen? What about reverence for things? I think these are dangerous for us. That's a dangerous thing. Again, I would, like I shared on the first couple of days, the legacy in our culture of the mysterious and the divine, and these things have been so, in a way, corrupted and so painful for us that we have armored our vulnerability and taken shelter in our logic. And in a way, we've gone too far. And I think that's what the Dalai Lama was saying. Everybody can use a little integration, coming to the middle. Okay, so we agreed yesterday that we weren't going to do the full Lam Rim. It was always ambitious anyway. I mean, that's the beautiful thing about the Lam Rim, is that you can do a survey in 3 or 4 days, or even one day you can do a survey. But you could stop along the way and open a portal and go deep into any one of them. So I think that's what we chose that we would do. We were in the initial stages, and yesterday we will remember what we did. We did a little review of the 6 preliminaries. What's the first preliminary? Create a space. Second preliminary, to make altars and to make offerings. The third preliminary, prepare the body and mind. The fourth preliminary, is to evoke the mentor. Before you evoke the mentor, you do the dissolution, the death process, then you do the rising into the Sambhogakaya, then you ask the mentor to come. Then the fifth preliminary is the sevenfold bonding process, where you yoke your mind in the kind of inner therapy with the mentor, and you eliminate negativities and cultivate virtues. That's the heart of the practice. That's the whole engine of the entire Dharma. All the teachings of the Dharma, all your hours spent, all the various intricacies of all the texts, they all come down to eliminating the negativities of your mind and cultivating the virtues. And the Buddha is the supreme result of fully eliminating the negativities and fully cultivating the virtues. And that Buddha is not special. That is the potentiality of every human mind. Actually, every sentient life, every consciousness itself. And then the sixth preliminary is the mandala offering. So that was our curriculum for meditation practice. And then we moved into the first stages of the path leading to renunciation. We started there with the 4 mind turnings. What's the first mind turning? The precious human life, endowed with the 18 qualities of liberties and fortunes. Things that we're free of, things that we don't have to deal with, thankfully, things that we innately have, the inner and outer resources that we have, that make this life so special. And the preciousness of human life contemplation is designed to evoke what sentiment? To gratitude. And how many of you have it this morning? Geshe Tenzin Zopa was telling us in Nepal, waking up, your first moment that you wake up, can you make a small mini meditation of appreciating the fact that you made it? We wake up and we're like, it's too bloody cold. First thought. And then you're taking a taxi here, and then you recognize that somebody was on the street last night in the cold. Yeah. Second mind turning. Once you recognize you've already won 10,000 lottery tickets, you can lose it. You can lose it at any moment. You don't know when, and nothing really is going to help you. Your bank account, you have 401ks here? What's the equivalent? What's the equivalent? Your retirement account is not going to help you. Your degrees aren't going to help you. Your accolades aren't going to help you. Your vast social network is not going to help you. There's only one going to when the death process starts, the only thing that's going to help you is your preparation, and certainly when you die, the only thing that's going to help you is all your virtue, because that's going to be the determining factor about what happens in the next phase. So have you been virtuous in this life? Maybe we'll evolve to the state in the West that the meditation or the mindfulness revolution will evolve to the virtue revolution. That would be a good thing. When it actually is sexy to be virtuous. I don't know. Yeah.
I kind of speak to, I think, some things we were talking about yesterday. You mentioned it about secular mindfulness. I guess it's kind of like, well, I try to make it loud and neutral, and it can't be, or shouldn't be. I have two questions. One is, even though these things have been taken out of their context and have been applied to like this context in this like kind of hollowed out way, or value neutral way, does virtue arise anyway, like eventually, on like on its own?
Hmm.
And secondly, how do we change that without everything in society changing, like ideological paradigms, socioeconomic frameworks? Because to my mind, like these have been hollowed out by like late capitalism. It has to take it, it spits it up, it takes pieces of it once, shoves out the rest, sells it back to people in this kind of like palatable form. And it's something I've just been thinking about recently. Yeah, I wonder if you could speak.
Wow, I love it. Let's skip the retreat and just have a discussion on this. Okay, so first of all, I think I have made a mistake in my career by being too outspoken and too critical of secular mindfulness. Calling it McMindfulness is kind of a jab. Okay, and because I'm a little disgusted with the West and just how perverse we are. So it comes out of it's a little reactive, okay, and it's been nuanced over the years. I definitely think there is this implicit assumption that if you just calm down, eventually you'll be kinder. If you just calm down first, eventually you'll be more virtuous. If you just calm down, people will naturally go deeper. And in a way, I kind of agree with that. It doesn't happen to everyone, it doesn't happen all the time, but I understand the assumption, and I probably would agree. Like people that do an 8-week mindfulness course that has absolutely no virtue explicitly mentioned in it, if they calm down, they turn inside, they soften, they breathe, they become aware of different things. They might become aware of their interactions, and if they become aware of their interactions, they might then become more considerate, let's say. Let's say that that's a very optimistic view of human nature, that if you just empower them in the slightest way, they will come into contact with something more natural and basically human about themselves. And I guess that's a very optimistic, I would wanna say yes to that. On the other hand, it can take a long time and it can be haphazard. It can be hit and miss and trial and error. And I think your second point is more, why do we have to do that? We have to do that because of the way our culture is set up and the way our receptivity. And so then it is more a comment less on, if you become aware, will you naturally go to virtue? I would probably have to say yes. But the bigger question is the second question that you ask is, why is this the way our society is? Why do we have to soft sell everything? Why did it work not having virtue presented? Why did the mindfulness revolution take off as an extracted, pithy, mechanical technique that could be learned in 8 weeks without the imposition, quote unquote, of virtue and paradigm analysis, wisdom? That's a very interesting anthropological question about our culture. Like, why is that? And you just the way you framed it, I know I share with you the concern about our culture. This is why my thesis of the book is that we have a sickness of paradigm. We are the recipients of 300 years of incredible reductionistic science. But it's so reductionistic that it has removed out any virtue or any sort of humanity, any connection to spirit. And that's why this would work. The minute you mention virtue, people quiver and they think it's religious. And then the religion is a hang-up and a leftover and a kind of unprocessed trauma that we inherit. We're suspicious of that kind of thing. We don't want to be controlled. We don't want to bow. We don't want to put our necks out. We don't want to be manipulated. We also think it's a bunch of hocus pocus. And in a way, if you've ever listened to Sam Harris, his critique of religion is there's some real concrete logic to it. Some of the dogmas just don't add up. Praying endlessly and hoping that, you're going to get your lot in life, and yet terrible things are happening, it just doesn't make any sense, and just believing for another life. Meanwhile, for this life, you're like indentured servitude to the church or to the masjid or whatever it is. And also the hypocrisy of claiming that you can go to war or have a crusade in the name of God. Like, these are crazy things. So there's an absolute justification to say this is crazy. But at the same time, something is definitely dramatically wrong with us. So this is a symptom of the culture that we would even do exactly what you said. It's like we mine for gems in southern Africa, and we don't care about destroying villages and neighborhoods and people there and the environment. We just take what we want. We extract what we want. And it's like an imperialistic attitude. And that's exactly what we might have done with Asian forms of contemplative practice. Ooh, this looks nice. Everything else goes. But that everything else goes, that's what creates liberation. But we're not interested in liberation because we don't believe in a mind and we don't believe in consciousness. So we only believe in like stress reduction.
And I suppose then I'd follow on to that to ask, well, then how far can we really get in our path when we don't have access to bits that have been excluded?
Well, so what meditation, when it's extracted, is capable of is reducing your stress tremendously and helping you calm down and helping you downshift. And when you live in a society where everybody's on the rat race, it's incredibly, that is already a revolutionary thing, which is why it's very popular, because people are dying of heart disease and people are dying of stress-related illnesses and people are dying of the rat race. It's killing us. That contemporary lifestyle is, there's no qualms about it. The research is there about how unhealthy it is. So then you introduce a technique, very simple, that people can put in their pocket, learn very readily and very cost-effective in a short amount of time to calm down. And then the underlying implicit assumption is then once they're calm, maybe they start to feel out that there's a different way of life. But it's not explicit, it's not made explicit to them, so they've got to kind of wander and figure it out. And that's where we are. That may be then a few people who did a secular course down the road, maybe they'll wonder if they go to the yoga center, maybe they'll come to Jamyang, I don't know. But then the likelihood is this is going to pop their bakchas, their seeds, and they're going to go, religion, I'm out of here. No membership for me. So they're going to be caught in a bardo. They've already done their mindfulness course. They've already tasted a little bit of stress reduction. It hasn't yielded, it hasn't completely changed their life because there's still other things that are snaring them. Do you follow? Do we agree or no? We can have a debate about it. It's no problem.
about spirituality and like yoga and meditation as mutually exclusive with like activism and doing political things and things that are applying and they're not. And again, it took me such a long time to realize that itself was a symptom of our ideology, that everything is compartmentalized, things are not holistic, there's no integration, and that actually that splitting off of life, church and state, this and that in itself is a way to kind of, it disempowers people. Like, I was listening to a podcast with and she's thinking about running for president, which is very interesting. I was kind of taken aback when I started thinking about it. And she was saying, in sort of Western spiritual communities, she was like, the fact that it's like people think something's distasteful. Go, I don't want to talk about politics, I just want to go and breathe. Like, that itself, she was like, we've been infantilized. She was like, we should be the biggest adults in the room, we should be the ones leading conversations.
Couldn't agree with her more.
But we're the ones who've just been like, she's like, that's when we've got you, like, to get you, almost like they muted you almost, to get you to not engage. And that's something that I felt very disillusioned with in the course of my own journey with all of this, is to see that everyone's split off, but everyone's trying to do the same thing, but they don't necessarily know it, and they don't know how, they're not empowered because they're not coming together,
Yeah. Great. A women's spiritual president would make a great president. Yeah.
But I think that she's going to get a lot of pushback, and I don't know, like, she did run for Congress a couple of years ago, and she became like fourth or something in her race. And it'll be really intriguing to see if she does run, and how it goes. I mean, 'cause my first reaction was, well, she's not a politician, she's not having political experience. Why shouldn't she leave it to someone else who maybe is, that's like, better?
Trump's not a politician either.
Someone you can't beat that with them doing the same thing.
Yeah, maybe not now. Maybe it's not going to work in the short term. But I think her point is we should be out there running. And I would like to happen in my lifetime, but if it happens in my kid's lifetime, then at least that's the right direction. Her attitude, and it's not just Marianne Williamson, she's telling all of us, let's not be compartmentalized and let's not be infantilized. And this is what I discovered in my book too. And to be frank, after 20 years of being in Tibetan Buddhism, I realized how insular my mind was. I know some things about Tibetan Buddhism. I know some things about the mind. I don't know anything about politics. I don't know anything about economic strategy. I don't know anything about technology. I don't know anything about agriculture. I don't know anything about anything that would make any sense to a bloody world that I want to live in. Do you know what I mean? And the statement that I've learned my whole life about these kinds of things is, change your mind, change the world. I'm sorry. I've changed my mind fairly as much as I possibly can, but that it hasn't translated to changing the world. And this is what I do for a living, whether they're 10 people or 100 people, I help people change their minds. But then every single one of you, whether you're in advertising or you're in technology or you're a doctor or you're a dentist or you're an educator or you're a therapist, you will have to change the systems. We will have to change the systems. And together we'll have to change the paradigm. If the paradigm is really the main cause, which I argue is, it's problematic to have this very myopic, narrow-minded, narcissistic, reductionistic paradigm. If we don't address that, the systems won't change. They will be Band-Aids, which is what I'm thinking that mindfulness is. It's a good Band-Aid, but it doesn't go far-reaching enough to the paradigm. The only thing that does that is wisdom and virtue. The things that have been extracted and left, the wisdom teachings and the virtue teachings, that we have left behind on the shores of India while we teach secular mindfulness, those are the only things that get deep enough to address the core paradigm of Western consumer, capitalist, materialist, dominated culture. So how do we get access? It's not like there's not places to have access. All the centers are there where FPMT has done an amazing job of preserving classical Tibetan Buddhism and the Tibet houses and the Dalai Lamas. And if it's not Tibetan Buddhism, then Ayurvedic science is available in its classic form. And Kundalini Yoga has been preserved by a lineage of great masters. And Ashtanga Yoga has been preserved right down from Patanjali. It's there and available. There are pockets of people that preserve the classical treaties. But that's only for a very, very select few who are interested in those things. And what my colleagues and I have tried to do is, okay, maybe not the masses, but a larger segment. This is the conundrum. How do you preserve the sophistication of the classical treaties but make them more available? The mindfulness route has decided to go to the widest audience possible but reduce the sophistication. On the other side, you have the FPMT Center that has decided to preserve the sophistication in the way that it has been preserved for 1,000 years, but nobody's coming through the door. Very few. So that's the conundrum. I don't know if there's a term for that. So then there are people like my colleagues and I that are saying, okay, what if you update the language, but you preserve the sophistication? It's still not the widest route. But if you use psychology, for example, which people aren't as scared of. People aren't scared of psychology. It's their language and it's our culture. We have 100 years of Freud. And we have cognitive behavioral therapy and insurance companies pay for it and it's just part of our medical world. But it is about the mind. It is about something intangible. It's not like you can go into the mind the way that you do the body and fix something. You have to talk to someone. You have to be contemplative or reflective about your experience. And you can't find anything tangible there. It is about emotions. But there is a language there that most people can relate to. Can you use that as a way in? And frankly, the science now, even though science... See, my thing with science is that the paradigm underneath science is reductionistic, and that's problematic. But the methodology of science is very consistent with the methodology of inquiry in Buddhism. The methodology of something that you use your critical faculties in order to analyze something very strategically, and whatever data that you come by, you ask your colleague to replicate it and see if they have the same thing. In general, that's the scientific method. Well, that's exactly how, for 1,000 years, meditative inquiry has happened. Someone has turned their microscope in on themselves, analyzed the nature of the self, discovered some kind of fluidity, and then asked their peers to say, what did you discover in your analysis? And then we have a vast body of knowledge, and we have some experts, psychonauts, and we have Buddha, but not just Buddha. We have a lot of contemplative people that have analyzed so thoroughly that actually something very fundamental about themselves has been transformed as a result of that inquiry. And not just one, it's been replicated and replicated and replicated. I mean, this is the thing most popular people, pop culture doesn't know this, but it's not just one Buddha. There are people that are awake. You just hang out with Lama Zopa. He's not operating on your time zone. He doesn't care if you're tired at 10 o'clock and he hasn't showed up yet, He's going to teach till 3 in the morning. And he's just operating in a very different space. And he's operating from a premise where his orientation in life has turned so thoroughly from the self-centered to the altruistic that there's no way that a sane human being can't sense that there's something different about him. But yeah, there will need to be some period, and I think that's where we are right now, of adapting so that we can reach people, but without making as huge a sacrifice. And maybe in the end, even though I critiqued mindfulness movement, maybe in the end, that is the evolution, the sociological evolution that it needed to take place to create enough interest. Millions of people at all strata entering into receptivity for something that's waiting over here in the next phase. What that will be and what that looks like, I have no idea. But if you look at Indian Buddhism going to Tibet, it wasn't Indian Buddhism being replicated one-to-one. It was Indian Buddhism going to China and merging with Taoism. It was Indian Buddhism going to Tibet and merging with Bön. It's Indian Buddhism and Tibetan Buddhism going to the United States and merging with science or psychology. And who knows what's going to be there. Who knows what it's going to look like when more of those masses who've already done their mindfulness study and then now are receptive to going deeper and reclaiming the wisdom traditions and the virtue traditions, what it's going to look like. And I don't think there has to be one stream. I think in parallel to that, you can have the Sangha members and the FPMT centers holding a line and making sure that everything, there's an unbroken chain of continuity in how it's presented. But if they have some flexibility, then maybe there's a second parallel process that has also the interest in preserving a continuity, but is also moving in the direction of being more integrative or adaptive. Then you can have both. Like I have colleagues I went to college with, and they took a different route. They went into Tibetan Buddhist studies. They learned the language, Tibetan Buddhism. They're scholars. And in a way, there's no difference between what they're studying 100 years ago and 500 years ago. They learned the classical Tibetan texts in the classical Tibetan language. So they will definitely hold the line of a continuity of an approach. And then I chose a different route where I learned enough Buddhism, but then tried to be integrative with it. And of course, that will receive some criticism, won't it? Right? But what is that criticism about? I think it's about fear. Maybe some of it is healthy skepticism, like don't flow away too much. We call these hardliners, don't we? Or we call them traditionalists or conservatives. We have this in politics too. You have people that want to preserve a lineage just as it's been transmitted, and you have people that want to adapt it. Right? You adapt it too far, you dilute it, and something gets lost. You stay too close to the tradition, and something can get stagnant, or something can become rigid, or something can become dogmatic. So you have arguments from both sides. I'm not saying this is an easy thing. I'm not saying it. I don't know exactly how it's going to work. But I also don't think that it's absolutely necessary that there's just one evolution.
Because you talk about our tendency to break things up, are very good at this sort of what's tritely referred to the left brain activity of breaking things up, and we don't seem to. It's like we know lots and lots of things in very detailed areas, and nobody really puts these things together. We don't tend to in our daily lives. Would you say that is more, that's what more rounded, more integrative thinking is more present in the Tibetan culture, let's say, that sort of older culture, but in Tibetan Buddhism particularly, or not? Is that something that's present there that we're not seeing, or are not seeing? In the sense of we're more and more bringing things together, because there's a lot of the Indians with their lists of this, lists of that. It all feels a little bit like breaking things apart still.
Their analysis definitely. In order to get to levels of complexity, you have to break things apart and then use each one of them as a portal into greater differentiation, which people at the surface can't tolerate that level of detail.
Sorry?
People at the surface can't tolerate that level of detail. Like if you get into Indian lists in a public talk, people shut down, right? But then the experts and the people that are really serious and gung-ho, They're bored with the superficial talks. They want to spend a retreat just going through the nuances of something. But your main point is, I don't think Tibetan Buddhism is one monolith. Okay, but I don't, there is no Tibetan Buddhism if you want to find it. But I think, I think in one sense they preserved a approach that respected critical inquiry with faith. The faith part has to do with unseen elements. The critical inquiry has to do with analysis. On the other hand, I don't think the Dalai Lama is a dummy. I think the Dalai Lama also has understood the limits of just Tibetan Buddhism. That's why he's in dialogue. I think that is very suggestive of his open-mindedness. That he's recognized the importance of having dialogue because there may be limitations to one point of view. And he has said, which I've never heard anyone say in his position, if there's something that neuroscience or physics can show us about our own tradition to be inaccurate, we'll have to adopt it. That's real open-mindedness. I don't know if it's come to that, but that's a real, I think, a very mature approach. He's not saying, "Oh, I've got to hold on tradition because I'm the leader of a tradition and it will die if I don't. If I open the doors." He's saying, "No, this is how the evolution happens. If your methodology can show something about the nature of reality that we ourselves have inaccurate, then it is truly to be Buddhist. It is to accept that revelation or that understanding." Anyway, this kind of stuff really interests me, but I don't want to bore people. So how do we want to? Is that good? Do we want to end there? Take a little break, a wee break, or do we have other thoughts about that? Right now, we're kind of in the area of like a social critique. And like maybe I would ask you, where do you find yourself? Like, where are you guys in this? Where do you locate yourself in this context? Maybe you have other thoughts or reflections, especially if I haven't heard from you. Some of you I haven't met. Are there some new people here today? Hello. Nice to meet you. You're just diving in Sunday morning. Any thoughts? No? You guys are way too polite and shy and polite and Have you heard of Dan Pinchbeck? Anybody? Daniel Pinchbeck? During the course of writing this book, I came up against again and again this, it felt like an invisible ceiling or invisible casing, the spiritual bubble. It's a great bubble. Don't get me wrong. But as I said, I didn't know so many things about the outer world and how the outer world works. And when you look out there, it's not working well. But everything requires a level of technical proficiency. So in order to make an economic system that's equitable for people, I don't think the spiritual people are going to know how to do that. Do you agree? Because, I mean, for me, like, I've committed more than half of my life learning Tibetan Buddhism, and you can already see I don't know very much. I could spend the rest of my life and just know a little bit more. But am I going to be able to cross domains and start in my mid-40s to be able to learn about politics enough with level of sufficiency to actually help or assist in creating a new paradigm there? Go ahead. Yes. Very optimistic.
It's not necessarily that everyone needs to kind of drop what they're doing and drop their banking and their technology and go over spiritual. It's that you just need to inject that spirituality into it because then it might shift that approach. And that might shift the way.
I agree. I totally agree. But if you were going to be an architect of and to put forward a proposition for a new paradigm, you'd have to be an expert in that area. Now, if that person was infused with more wisdom and more virtue, they could be really, really driven by a good motivation in order to create something that actually works and works for everybody, or works for as many people as possible, or at least works from a place that is trying to do that. The bar gets lower and lower. But what I learned in Dan Pinchbeck's book, it's called How Soon Is Now. And Dan Pinchbeck is maybe in his late 40s, early 50s. He was on a hero's journey, and he discovered ayahuasca, which is a plant medicine that the shamans use to create an altered state of consciousness in order to reveal the nature of reality. And the descriptions of what, I'm not going to ask you if you've had your ayahuasca experiences yet, but the nature of reality on those plant medicines are the same as those described in meditative experience and in Sufi dancing, and the kind of oneness experience, which is quintessential oneness experience. The one where the world melts from the sense of disparate, the way that the mind is appearing things as disparate objects dissolves, and there is a sense of unification, fluidity. And after he had that experience, he was called to a kind of mission to see if he could identify leaders and proponents of alternative economic policy, alternative political policy, alternative cultural values, alternative agricultural forms, so that we could reverse the fact that the trajectory that we're on is on complete suicide. And his book, each chapter is in one of these domains, and what he does is he identifies new solutions that are on there are contingencies of experts in each of these domains that have already come up with solutions, and they've either implemented them in a pilot, or they're being held back by corporations and invested interest, concurrent invested interest. But for me, it was really helpful because what it did was, after having been on my cushion for 20 years, it actually showed me, like, there are solutions. And people have them. They're ready to go. And they're based on good values, which most of us have missing in a corporate or capitalistic society. It's all about me. That's not going to work. That's why we're destroying the planet. So, like, for example, I mentioned Bitcoin is a way of circumventing central control over money system, which actually disempowers so many people and only a few benefit. So people have invented that, and in 10 years, hopefully it works and it takes off, and suddenly the control of the central banking system is disempowered. But just along the line, agriculture, big pharma, big agro, like these models that are all based on industrialization, and they're based on capitalism, they're based on self-interest. There will be alternatives. So then it's really about getting a zeitgeist of the populace to feel that they can make that shift and give up one way of life for another. But it's hopeful. His book is very hopeful because it's one after another. These are the alternatives out there. Daniel Pinchbeck. He's written a few books, and his latest one is called How Soon Is Now. And our friend Russell Brand has written the foreword, I think. I might have just lost half of you. But I talked to Daniel about that, and I think, he's like, how do I get this book into people's hands? Well, sometimes you have to have celebrity power to do that. Yeah.
Just like preventative medicine isn't a solution. I'm not saying anything new. To start with the young generation, with children, with schools, with integrating new ways of thinking in schools. It's not popular, and not creating schools just for that, because there are schools like that, but just finding a way to bring this into a young generation. If you look at
I mean, I actually think that you guys here in the UK have done a better job than us in the United States, because even secular mindfulness is now fully adapted by the NHS. Is it NHS, the National Health System? Yeah, we haven't been able to accomplish that. And I don't know if there's an attempt to do something similar with the public school system, but I imagine that's knocking on the door. But again, so we go back to the two questions you proposed. The first one is, will it eventually lead to good virtue? I think yes, and so why not try to bring mindfulness into the school system? If you just use something like, what do you call PE here? Physical education, what do you call that? Same thing? So if you just use the training pedagogy of physical education and you promote mental education or mental hygiene, that people should sit for 15 minutes, students should be trained how to concentrate their mind in a basic course, just like getting some physical activity is important, and getting a right nutritional balance. I mean, nutrition is now in the system too, right? Should be. There's enough cultural zeitgeist and appreciation for the importance of a nutritious meal that will bring it into the school system eventually.
There's a certain amount of resistance to things like mindfulness, that it's classed as, some people see it as too religious.
Right.
And not being a CAE type country,
But it's in the health sector, so that means if it's already it's practical, but it's not religious. Your doctor couldn't.
We have things like play schools and things like that.
It's not too much of a leap if your doctor can say, well, here's a mindfulness course as an alternative to a pharmaceutical protocol, to imagine a time where the school system will be like, well, we have half an hour of PE 3 times a week. We're going to also have a half an hour of mental training. I think that's within reach. I don't think that, I mean, it'll have a few barriers, but it doesn't seem. So in that way, we can make a inroad and reach kids, and at least for the first time in our culture's history, educate our children that they even have a mind. Can you believe it? Yeah. It's just so ridiculous. And I have 25 years of studying, and it's in the field of psychology, and in Western psychology, they have no definition of mind. None. Well, what the bloody hell are we studying? Yes, it's been thoroughly reduced to the brain and consciousness, and now all the psychoanalytic training institutes have been replaced with cognitive behavioral therapy and neuroscience. Neuroscience is wonderful, but like the last remaining possibility of having a conversation, of accessing consciousness and using a dialogue and rapport over time is being replaced by a study of the mind as being just an epiphenomenon of the brain in order for pharmaceutical companies to develop their interventions. And it's all being led by money. That's the sad thing. Yeah. Should we take a break, guys? Because are you guys getting anxious? Let's take a 15-minute break, and then we'll come back at 1. Okay, and we'll come back at 12, and we'll go to 1, and we'll do a solid run on karma, okay? And then just by way of apologizing in advance, I do have to leave a little earlier today because apparently to get to Heathrow and catch my flight, I'm thinking about ending at 4, so my apologies in advance for those of you that wanted to go to 5, but we'll try to reduce lunch and some of the breaks to make up for the time, okay? If I announced that in New York City, I would get stoned. And I don't mean smoking a marijuana cigarette. Okay, thank you.